So the highly anticipated sequel to the survival game The Forest just came out, and while it is still an early access game, it is absolutely an improvement over the original. And Sons of the Forest might just be one of the most polished early access games out there, and having spent some time with the game now, I can confidently say that for around $30, the game is absolutely worth it, but it does have some jankiness, which we'll get into. So the game starts with you being sent out on a search and rescue mission in order to find billionaire Edward Puffton and his family, and after being shot down by the helicopter's ancient rival, the Wooden Arrow, you end up stranded on an island filled with monsters and cannibals. Now the first big difference you'll notice this time around is that we are joined by several AI companions, chief among them old Kelvin over here, and although he sometimes takes his orders to chop down trees a little too literally, he more than makes up for it with sheer grit and determination. Commands are issued with a pretty genius do this then that system, allowing for a really fluid way to give orders and allow players to skip some of the game's more menial tasks like collecting logs or sticks. You can also tell him to catch fish, which he does by standing like a bear in a waterfall catching them with his bare hands. And there's also Virginia, the ballet-loving daughter of billionaire Edward Puffton who we're trying to rescue. Now she can be befriended by not wearing weapons or running towards her, and you essentially just have to ignore her until she warms up to you. If successful, she will give the players gifts like berries and fish, and you'll also be able to equip her with a pistol, shotgun, GPS locator, as well as different outfits found in the game. Giving her the handgun is pretty much a no-brainer, as she'll get infinite ammo and help you along the way. All in all, these new companions should help allow solo players to avoid some of the more grindy parts that can be found in this genre, while still being useful to people playing online. You just don't kill them, as they won't respawn. Now I just want to briefly mention a mod here that might be fun to try out. It's by a guy named Germinate, and the mod basically allows for multiple Kelvins, and you should really check it out because it makes solo games just that much better. Now whether you're running down the beach, collecting items, taking a stroll through the forest, or sledding down a snowy mountain, the game looks absolutely gorgeous, and I was actually surprised to learn that this game was running on Unity. Like the forest really has some breathtaking scenery, and the draw distance up in the mountains just really allow you to get a sense of just how big this place is. Exploring caves is not only a visual treat, but there's some really great sound design in here as well. And being underwater is oppressively dark and unnerving, and this time around the player is also able to find key cards, allowing you to explore all the underground facilities spread throughout the island. And while they might not be as visually expressive like the forest above, they really manage to give these places a sense of mystery and convey like a really foreboding tone. And the changing seasons also allow for some beautiful scenery, and I mean this just might be the best looking survival game currently out there. And compared to the first game, I just have City to World just seems more alive, you know? And if you want to experience it without all the enemies in the way, there's even a mode for that. So all in all, I think that all kinds of players will just have a great time with this game. So chopping down trees and planning your next building is one of the main draws of these kinds of games, and there's just so much fun like watching your little cabin turn into a real base and then having to do it all over again as your host forgot to save the game. And while the game starts you off easy enough by setting up a little tent and then creating a fire, slowly you'll ramp up with your building, and while there are pre-made buildings to choose from, the game encourages you to build things by hand. While the game is pretty lacking in general when it comes to tutorials and info, the build system itself is pretty smart with automatic snap points, and if snapping doesn't work, the game allows you to place a tilted pillar which you can then lift up, allowing you to build on uneven terrain more easily. You can also choose where to split up logs, allowing for custom buildings to be made. Now it can be a bit janky at times, but I found that you could get out of most situations with a bit of careful planning. However, if you are completely new to the genre, I can understand if you feel a bit confused. This time around, there also doesn't seem to be a whole lot in the way of traps to kill enemies with, and I kinda missed the falling log trap from the first game. And in general, there's not a whole lot to craft just yet, so if you're really into that, you might want to wait a while before getting this game. Now the enemies in this game are kinda great, like they're always lurking around in the trees or in the bushes, and you can hear their haunting screams echoing throughout the forest. You'll also be running into them a lot while exploring, and although pretty docile at first, as the days progress you start facing tougher enemies and they'll attack you more as well. Now the variants inside the cave are really unsettling, and you can even see them breathing, like there's so much attention to detail when it comes to these creatures. And all in all, like I have to say, this game has really nailed the new enemies. And also the environments themselves are pretty unsettling. Like especially when you're like exploring the caves and finding all of the mysterious like underground facilities, you know? Like the game is really starts to shine in these environments. And progression is also made extremely clear for an open world game like this. Like you need to find the rope gun, and then you need to find a rebreather, and then you can get the shovel, and all in all, like the progression just makes sense. And with all the caves marked on the maps, you're never really all that confused about where to go, making the experience far more enjoyable than the first game. Now bone armor, creepy armor all make a return here, allowing you to cosplay the Michelin Man after a rough night out. And there's the addition of mesh armor, which can be printed in the new 3D printer, where you can also print flasks, arrows, and... Huh? That's strange. Now the core health mechanics are pretty straightforward. Having low food and water meters will lower your max stamina, meaning you will do everything from chopping wood slower, take exhausting faster when attacking enemies, and you will also tire faster, and if you get tired you get lowered stamina and so on. Like a true gamer though, you can just remedy this by drinking copious amounts of energy drinks and chop trees all night. So even if you do run out of all the meters, you can still make do on the lower difficulties. So the game at least allows you to focus on the more fun aspects of the game rather than worrying about health all the time. There's also like an entire arsenal packed in your bag, and while I can respect the game wanting to go with a realistic route, with things like having to go through your backpack to equip items and looking down to load your bow, at least allow us to hotkey our weapons and don't unequip everything if you get downed. Since once you're resurrected in a fight, you need to dive back into your inventory to equip a weapon, potentially getting you killed or taking unnecessary damage. Even after figuring out that you can put items in your backpack and hold the inventory key to hold it up and pick items from it, it is still a far from flawless system, and considering the game has a game mode without enemies, the realistic argument doesn't really hold water here, I feel like. Also having to move the camera around to move around inside the inventory is kind of tedious after a while, and overall I wish the UI just had more quick access options. Now, while some of the bugs I encountered on my playthroughs were pretty harmless, for example, there's funny stuff like the lakes being haunted, shelves not consuming logs, giving you an infinite amount of shelves to place, or the inventory screen sometimes taking ages to load. But there's also more serious bugs like the 3D printer getting stuck and not working, or even worse, keycards failing to open doors required to progress the story, or players falling through the world while in a dungeon requiring them to swim back underneath the world or run out of oxygen in order to respawn. Although all of these issues were resolved by reverting back to a previous save. If you haven't done that in a while, well, you're just basically out of luck. The game also suffers from frame drops every now and then, so I do recommend installing it on an SSD drive if you're playing on PC. I did experience less frame drops while playing single player rather than multiplayer, so that could be the issue, as almost our entire party experienced frame drops in certain areas. All in all though, like we never really found any game-breaking stuff that you couldn't get out of, so since the game is still early access, I wouldn't be too worried about it just yet, unless you hope that they improve it in the future. Alright, so I'm not gonna go into detail about the story, as there's far better channels for that, and if you don't want to see anything, feel free to leave right now. So what I can tell you is all the weird and confusing elements of the first games are still here. You're part of a rescue squad trying to see the Puffton family who have been missing for a while, and along the way you'll find references to a golden cube with some sort of powers, and there's references to not staying inside of it. You'll also be exploring like tons of underground facilities and uncovering clues and being shown mysterious buildings, and you sort of have to piece together what has gone down here. And all in all, I think that if you love mysteries, you're really gonna like this story. So yeah, like despite some mostly just like weird and funny bugs, this is a really great game that you can just pick up and have a really great time in. I think that fans of horror, building games and mysteries can all find something to enjoy here, and the game will just take you to a ride, and once finished, don't forget to pick up your bag and just... guys? Oh,